Mr. Chair, we are live.
Planning and Zoning Board Meeting, City Hall, Commission Chamber, Wednesday. Hello, got it. Welcome to City Lake Worth Beach Planning and Zoning Board Meeting, City Hall, Commission Chamber, Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 at 6 p.m. Okay, can we have a roll call and recording of absences, please?
Mark Hum,
Here.
Juan Cotton,
Here.
Zaid Shamsi Basha,
Here.
Dan Waleski, Evelyn Urquio,
Here.
Dave Matthews,
Here.
Henry Paulson.
Here.
You have a forum.
Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll note that Dan Waleski has arrived.
All right,
Mr. Chair, we are live.
okay. That. So, any additions, deletions? I've got a. Hello. Got it. Welcome to City Lakewood Beach Planning and Zoning Board Meeting, City Hall, Commission Chamber, Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 at 6 p.m. Okay, can we have a roll call and recording of absences, please?
Mark Hum,
Here.
Juan Cotton,
Here.
Zaid Shamsi Basha,
Here.
Dan Waleski.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Okay, we're all set. Sorry for that.
So we can continue? Okay. Any additions, deletions, reordering, and approval of the agenda?
No additions, deletions, or reorder. Mr. Chair.
Okay, so shall we move to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, approval of the minutes. Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We have cases, the swearing in of staff and applicants, especially since we have the illustrious Mr. Waters here.
Swearing in is not necessary for presentation of permits.
We'll take your word for it. Okay. So it looks like we have ordinances to deal with. Have the proof of publication?
Meeting packet provided in the meeting packet.
Okay, that's fine. Any withdrawals, postponements?
No,
Anything-
Mr. Chair.
Anything coming up? All right, great. Board disclosure, has anybody been approached, or have you dealt with anything on these? Okay, I guess that's fine. It was on there, so I'll just, I got it, but it was on there, so I'm going through my standard thing. Public hearings, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business we need to deal with? No? Looks like a good one. New business, item A. Consideration of an ordinance amending chapter 23. Would you like to read that?
Love to.
There you go.
This is ordinance 2024 with a blank, an ordinance of the city of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, amending chapter 23 land development regulations, section 23.2-39 affordable workforce housing program, providing for severability, conflicts, codification, and effective date.
And for the viewing public, it's ordinance 2024-05. William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. Over the past 3 years, I guess, the commission has been asking us on how to improve and incentivize the stream of affordable and workforce housing units in the city. They also recently received the final report from Florida Atlantic University on the housing crisis in the city, which had a number of recommendations and suggestions. The report itself is almost 300 pages long. But in there, it did talk about some things that we can do, and we've been discussing over the past 6 months or so at the encouragement of at least 2 of the commissioners, if not 3, that we should be trying to encourage accessory dwelling units in some fashion in the city. The CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, also has received a substantial amount of funding from the federal level as well as the city through ARPA to funnel money to its various housing partners to build affordable housing, both for homeownership as well as for rental. So there were already a couple little areas in the affordable housing program that needed to be clarified. But what it's providing now is that we have a 15% bonus that an affordable housing project can get, regardless of where it's located. Well, often that ends up being a percentage of a unit, not a full unit. So one of the things that's being proposed is that that percentage, that 15% increase, at least creates 1 accessory dwelling unit, which will have to be deed restricted under our program, which is 25 years. And based on whether it's got a studio space or up to 2 bedrooms, there are income requirements and some other things that are governed by the median household income of the county. The other piece is that the CRA has requested that when they have parcels that have multiple lots of record, that each lot of record could be afforded the 1 additional unit. So those 2 changes are what's proposed here. It'll be interesting to see how the commission comes down on it, since we have a new member. But this is in response to encouragement from, like I said, at least 2, if not 3 commissioners to provide an additional incentive. There's also incentives from the state that talk about accessory dwelling units. And part of theirs is just like they can happen anywhere. And we did not want to open up the door or propose opening the door up that wide. We wanted it under certain fairly specific guidelines that they did have to be deed restricted, and it was already going to fall under our affordable housing program. And so this is up for your consideration to provide a recommendation to the city commission.
I haven't been involved with a couple of projects in the Palm Beach County affordable housing program. I could say it's a huge failure. There aren't many of them that have actually come up. And you can mark like 2 or 3 in the whole county. It's ridiculous because the way it's set up is not conducive to development, and then it's not even conducive to helping. I mean, it's odd where it's also.
The city of Lake Worth Beach in its 7 square miles has produced more of dedicated, deed-restricted affordable housing than the entire county has in the past 13 years.
So what I was trying to say was, I hope that we are not headed the way that the county has structured their program, because I really am not a big fan of it at all. So I hope that somehow a lot of these things will, I mean, really serve its purpose to get the affordable housing in the right place, and also work with developers to bring it forward somehow.
We already have probably close to 200 units that are on the boards in some place in the entitlement process, other through Live Local or other types of major housing communities or planned developments. And then I tried to call Jonah Lee, with the CRA director, earlier today, and I missed her, how many units they have in the pipeline, but it's at least 50 or 60. Most of those are going to be, I believe, home ownership options, either through Housing Renaissance, Adopt a Family, or Habitat for Humanity. But they're looking throughout the CRA area for lots to build the homes, but she's also got options on several properties where there could be a mixed income multi-unit project. And there's one on G, one on H, South F. There are some lots in play in the southern part of the city. And so how it will all flesh out, I don't know. But we'll see. But this provides another little carrot to encourage you to at least build one more unit, and it would be deed restricted.
Yeah. So,
Just a question, may I have a question, Seth? I dealt a lot years ago up north with ADUs, and it had good points and bad points. I think what happened was a lot of people were converting garages in different places, and it got out of control. And then so many of them were opening up to what we used to call mother-daughter or granny type of places that weren't following all the rules. And you know, I read the rules here on this. A question: what type of square footage minimum would you talk about? 200 square feet, 300 square feet?
In our land development regulations and our minimum unit size, and it's particular to each zoning district. Basically, a studio cannot be less than 400 square feet. However, we allow affordable one to be 15% less, and that's looking to be 340. A one bedroom is 600 square feet, and you can minus off 15%, which is 90, which makes it 510. A two bedroom is 800, and a three bedroom or more is 1,000.
1,000?
Now, this does not change the overall zoning regulation in terms of lot area ratio, lot coverage, building lot coverage, floor area ratio, those
Parking.
things. And so if your lot's already built out with what you have, even though this may provide you additional unit, unless you figure out how to incorporate that unit in the structure that you already have, you can't have one. It also will be deed restricted for 25 years with the option that the city, if it so chose, could provide an incentive at the end of that 25 years to the owner of the property at that time to have it deed restricted for another 25 years. And so these are not just open to anybody on the market. If somebody wants to build, this would not cover someone building one for a mother-in-law suite or a granny flat unless it was rented to that individual or that person and they met the income requirements of the code. What they can do in many districts is build what's basically a guest suite or a guest building with no kitchen.
I think that's what concerned me the most was when they were making them, as we used to call them, mother-daughter or the granny, same type of thing. That's where it got out of hand a bit up north when we were dealing with the ADUs on that. So thank you for the clarification.
The density here this is in addition to the other density bonuses that they would get through either tier 1 or tier 2 approval, right? Is that how I'm reading it? So if they had a property and they were zoned for however many units and then they got the bonuses on top of that, if it was originally 6 25-foot lots, they would then get 6 additional units on top of the other bonuses. Is that how I'm reading it?
Only if that's in the CRA district.
Only if that's
We're not proposing that everywhere. Those are lots of record. And again, you cannot build, this does not provide any provision to allow more building that would already be allowed. So that floor area ratio is still in play, the building lot coverage. Some of the incentives may not lead to a full unit. It may be that it works out that the 15% increase at the end of everything ends up with like, okay, I can do 7.5 more units. Well, this would allow us to round it up to 8 versus the 7.5. So I can't say that across the board, it's going to like be all ones. It's really going to be on a case by case basis, how we look at those.
Okay, so when it says any lot, so if everything's combined into unity of title and it's outside of these CRA, regardless of how many units, this would just be one additional unit to it.
Right.
So this really is going to be more impactful on small, where you're building a duplex or a small development within the city.
And we have a lot of projects that came in, and when I think Mr. Cotton had one where we did the percentage and it got him to say 3.67.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to have 4. So
Yep.
this allows that to go to 4 versus that 0.67 being left on the table.
Yeah, that's
Because
on
under the
Federal Highway. Yeah.
comp plan, we aren't allowed to round up. But this provision will allow us to round up as long as that additional unit was deed restricted.
Yeah, we were happy to do it too, and the developer was very happy. He's okay with the whole thing. He said it's 3 or 4, it all makes it fine. So he was happy to do it. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I've still got, so this, the section or line F, just to clarify this, the attachment has all the pages of the existing workforce housing, but the only changes are to F, G, or, under the tier 1 and tier 2, just on that first page, the underline, it's struck through sections. None of the other pages are having, okay. I went through them. I didn't see anything, but I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
It's a tier 1.
So I guess the concern that I still have with this, in general, I'm very much in favor of ADUs within the city. I think that they should be, like, we should reduce some of the obstacles and allow them to be built regardless of whether or not they're being designated through land use restriction on single family homes or otherwise. That's kind of where my opinion is on. But I want to make sure with regards to this, this would apply again to single family homes in the strict single family zoning as well, right? So
It
single
could,
family
but if
use.
you could provide a recommendation that you don't want it to apply to SFR district.
The issue that I still have, I mean, I know there are, to me, it's not an issue. If you're going to build to me, product type generally dictates affordability. So when you're building smaller accessory dwelling units, you're not leasing them for, $3,000 a month. And I believe this would also still be subject to the provision if you were building on a lot of that it can't exceed, 40% of the primary dwelling square footage
Or 1,000 square feet.
or 1,000 square feet.
think that's
It can't exceed 1,000 or,
It's 40% or 1,000. Yeah.
so sorry, it's 40% or up to a maximum of 1,000 square feet? And a maximum of 40%, a minimum of 400. So you've got the primary dwelling has to be over 1,000 square feet to even qualify for this. And that's something that so I'm definitely interested in this, but I want to dive deep into it because I feel like sometimes that 40% square footage might hold things back. Where if you've got, like, my house I have an ADU on my property that was built originally in the 1930s. But my house is only about 950 square feet. So under the current code, if someone had a small house like mine, but did not have an ADU, they couldn't build an ADU even with this provision.
They can build a 360 square foot one, which would be a studio.
If they had exactly 40% of mine, but if they had 850 square feet, they couldn't. And I have someone that I know in the neighborhood, just as an example, that has asked me about whether they would be legally allowed to build an ADU, but they have a very small house. They've got a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house it's a very cute little house, but it's probably only 450 square feet. That the overall house that's
And
built.
that doesn't even meet our minimum square footage for a principal structure, a residential, which is 800.
Actually, it's on a 50-foot
So
lot.
if it's
They
going
have
to
a
be an
huge
accessory,
backyard.
by inference, the accessory should be smaller than the principal.
Has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they need to build a new house for themselves and make their original house the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, we've been through that on some properties as well. And then you get into the new one has to be 40%. So now you have to build a significantly large, you have to build an 1,800 square foot house.
This is not going to solve everybody's problem.
It's not. The section F, I don't really have any issue with. Well, I guess I do, because I still feel like if you've got somebody who there are neighborhoods that are historically and have always been, and everybody is very fierce in those neighborhoods about protecting their single family and not having rentals in their backyard. And there's only a few of those neighborhoods that I'm aware of, but those people have been pretty vocal about not wanting to have ADUs in there. We have other areas of the city where ADUs are historically built, and now in some cases they can't be built. And I'm totally want that to open up and want everyone to be able to build ADUs. If your neighbor has one and it used to be accepted, it should be accepted today. But I'm kind of nervous about going into some of those areas where it's all single family and then just saying you can now build one without any kind of, this seems like a way around what was designed to be a single family district. The The CRA boundaries, can you refresh me again how far the CRA extends north and south?
It's along Dixie Highway. It's the eastern property line of the first lot and goes all the way over west to the railroad track. And then it comes down, it's both sides of 10th and both sides of 6th to about B, halfway to A. And then on Royal Poinciana and Tropical Ridge, it sort of wiggles through that neighborhood, basically down C Street. And then it includes all of downtown, and it goes Lake and Lucerne all the way to B.
Again, Lucerne all the way down to B. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on this one? Sorry, I don't want to take up the whole. Yeah, I think if F, in order for me to support F, I think I would want to exclude for now, the single family. And I don't know how to describe, because you have single family, we currently have single family zoning with an underlying multifamily land use. And that's not where I'm talking about restricting it.
Actually, I don't think we have anywhere where it's SFR and it has an underlying, it may have an underlying future land use of medium density, which would allow the SFTF 14, but it's not a huge area because we only pulled it back in 2013. We took 2 blocks out of MF 30, 2 blocks out of MF 20, and then 2 blocks out of SFTF 14. So effectively, in some areas, the SFR got 4 blocks bigger on the south side or on the north side.
Okay. And I guess I'm okay with saying that it's not applicable to SFR, but I would even open it up to, because I still think the SFR that had the medium density underlying land use within those neighborhoods, there is multifamily product within there. And so I don't feel like we're kind of, it's not the thin edge of the wedge, so to speak. You don't have this kind of preserved single family. You have multifamily already distributed through there. I don't know if anybody else has any objection to it, but I guess that's my objection, is that we're including the single family residential that has the underlying land use of single family residential as well.
Personally, don't have an issue with that, to be honest, especially because, there was this one client I helped buy a house on South End Street, and they have a huge backyard on there. I don't know if it'll be applicable to them, but the idea of having passive income like that for someone single family, I like that idea. But I get it.
What we can do, and I have to work through with the GIS, to get at what Mr. Walensky's pointing out, we can, if you want to include it as a recommendation, is have staff look at what areas medium density residential future land use is underlying the SFR and present that to the commission as like, maybe that's a preference that those would be that segregated area of SFR would allow this to happen if it were outside the CRA area, because there is a little bit of SFR in the CRA, or just let it be throughout all SFR, and then the commission can decide.
I mean, given that we're just making recommendations in any event, I think that sounds reasonable.
To bring it up and just to tell them that we would like to, for them to look at that. I mean, good. Anybody else? Your vote?
This-
Public comment, please.
Oh, sorry. This wouldn't affect someone who already has the ability to build an ADU by right. This wouldn't affect them by diminishing what they have and making them do work for some. This is just if you have a lot that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do an ADU.
They might get an extra one.
Understood.
Rare, but they might get an extra.
Okay, someone mentioned public comment. Sir, anybody? Okay.
Yep.
Is it turned off?
It's just, turn off this one.
Hi, Yeah, Chris Eichman, 809 North Palmway. I just had one question relative to the rounding up of the bonus. So if it's not, 4.6, you get 5. How does that apply to parking, and how is parking considered in that?
They
It
still have to
should-
provide the parking
Right,
requirement.
you have to provide it
All
for the
other
unit.
regulations
Yeah.
applicable to that district apply.
Yeah,
Parking is
Yeah.
required.
yes. Okay, do I hear a motion? On 202405.
Okay, I will make a motion. We'll see if you guys like it here. So, I make a motion to approve, ordinance number 202, recommend approval of ordinance number 2024-05, consideration of an ordinance amending, chapter 23 land development regulations. Do I need to read the whole thing? Okay. With the, one, addition that we recommend to the city commission that they not include this for single-family residential homes, single-family residential zoning that has underlying land use of single-family residential as well.
Just the changes to F and G, not A.
What's here to be applied?
G,
One applied to single family.
yeah, I don't think wouldn't even apply there. Yeah.
And how do we phrase it if not all of us want that extra recommendation?
Yes.
Well,
wait,
no,
wait,
in
we're
terms
just-
of the recommendation, but yes to the, how it's
Well,
currently.
so-
I have a motion on the floor that
Right.
includes what
Yes
Mr.
or
Wilks,
no?
you're right.
Right.
If stated, if he gets a second, you vote on it as it's stated, up or down. And if it doesn't move forward, then you can do an alternate motion, basically describing what you've proposed.
I would second that motion.
All in
As
favor?
stated.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
On item B,
Ordinance 2024-06, an ordinance of the city of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, amending chapter 23 land development regulations, Article 1, general provisions, Division 2, definitions, section 23.1-12, definitions, Article 2, administration, Division 3, permits, section 23.2-28, administrative adjustments, administrative use permits, Article 3, zoning districts, Division 2, residential districts, section 23.3-7, SFR, single family residential, section 23.3-8, SFTF 14, single family and two family residential, section 23.3-10, MF 20, multifamily residential, section 23.3-11, MF 30, medium density multifamily residential, and section 23.3-12, MF 40, high density multifamily residential. Article 3, zoning districts, Division 3, mixed use districts, section 23.3-13, MUE, mixed use east, and section 23.3-16, MUFH, mixed use federal highway. Article 4, development standards, section 23.4-3, exterior lighting, section 23.4-4, fences, walls, and gates, section 23.4-16, mechanical systems equipment for existing residential structures, and section 23.4-19, outdoor storage and open air operations. Article 5, supplemental regulations, section 23.5-1, signs, and section 23.5-4, historic preservation, providing for severability, conflicts, codification, and an effective date.
Could you repeat that?
No.
No.
I didn't get the middle section.
All right, Mr. Chair, for the record, Scott Rodriguez, Planning and Preservation. So as the staff report indicates, this is really a lot of housekeeping items and clarifications related to administrative adjustments pools, on double frontage lots. Streetlights, which is really related to, code enforcement. Fences and walls, outdoor storage, historic preservation, and like I said, some housekeeping items. I do want to point out that there is gonna be, I did not strike out under the historic preservation section. On the last, should be on the last page under historic preservation. The portion that needs to be stricken is at the very last sentence. And given an opportunity to comment needs to be stricken, which is line 34, I'm sorry. Sorry, 1034. It's cut off on the page. Any questions of staff?
Wait, I don't see, the line number. Sorry, 1,134?
The one is chopped off.
Yeah.
What section number?
Exhibit O.
Huh?
Exhibit O.
Exhibit O.
The very last sentence.
I do have one thing, which I think is pretty impactful for Lake Worth in general, is the historic preservation of Florida statutes, the demolition of the non-contributing single-family structures, because those are around, and those are the ones that a lot of developers pick to kind of get rid of one way or another. Now, because of special flood hazard areas, I mean, what happens? Are they going to get preference over the ones that are not in flood hazard areas, or to be demolished?
This is all in reference to changes that were made to the Florida statute.
Right.
The only municipality I am aware of that got an exemption from this was the town of Palm Beach and possibly Key West.
Right. Yeah, Key West does have it because I finished the house there. Yeah,
And so, yeah, we're a little in a bad place
got it.
because of the state.
No, I know. So I'm just saying, so how's it going forward? Are we gonna just? Because I get asked these questions all the time by,
Going forward, how it's going forward as it's written. I mean,
so, okay. All right,
that's what the state says. Now, we could try to like not allow it to happen. A lawsuit's filed and we're gonna lose. And then under this other Florida statute changes, we're paying their attorney's fees and ours.
Alright.
So it's not a good place to be in.
okay. That was just my comment.
It's pretty
because-
awful, actually.
Yeah. All right. Questions from the board?
I got a quick question. Under Exhibit M, where you've got outdoor storage and open air operations, what do you mean exactly by open air operations?
So essentially, these open air operations are uses that, as it indicates, has just display areas. The reason it's stricken here is because it's duplicated in the code. So it still exists in the code, it just exists in a different section. It's just duplicated. We're just striking that out.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking at the place where you don't allow a sandwich board, but like businesses downtown could have a sandwich board or not in the other portion of a code.
We're going to deal with that when we revisit design code. We can't tackle it all. Under the way the sandwich board is written, the only place they really legally can happen is in front of restaurants on Lake and Lucerne. Though they have proliferated other places and we have not caught up to actually dealing with them. But, and sadly, many of the sidewalks where people want them, once they're out, is now an ADA obstacle. So we're in another pickle, which we will deal with in a future date.
Thank you.
I've got a couple ones on this too. So under the very first page, the building lot coverage, the 2 feet depth of an overhang. I know there's been some instances where people have tried to kind of cheat and put huge porch overhangs, but if you're doing a 2'6" or a 3 foot overhang on a single family home, to shade the windows for green building type of a performance standard, would that now count as, if it was a 3 foot overhang, it would count as additional 1 foot of square footage all the way around the perimeter of the house? Okay. And what's the intent of that is for?
Well, there's a point at which we don't want the entire lot to be covered with a roof, even if it's underneath an eave. If you would like to recommend that it be expanded from 2 feet to a different number, we can take that under consideration and see if there are going to be any extenuating circumstances that we hadn't envisioned by doing that.
Yeah, I would make that recommendation because I know there's a house I'm building now that has a 3 foot overhang. That's big. That's the largest I've seen. 2'6" is something that I do pretty common on houses because it does provide some additional shade over the windows and you get less solar heat gain and more energy efficient home.
My only caveat would be that if you put it in there, there has to be a proviso that it cannot come within 3 feet of the property line.
I think that's already under the code. Yeah. So as far as overhangs, they
fire,
can't extend
Well,
within.
it's in the building code section, but it's not in the LDRs, and people go too often, design their little house just like they want, get a certificate of appropriateness, follow the LDRs, get to the building code, and the building code says you can't do that. So with the eve, we know there's going to be a building code issue if that eve extends and is closer to the property line than 3 feet. So we might as well include the little thing in parentheses stating that.
Okay.
5 feet minimum from
from the wall, but you can extend
2 feet.
you can extend 2 feet into the setback.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
So you can,
fireproofs that edge,
so
yeah.
if you do a
There's no
3
tons
foot
of-
thing, you end up setting your house 1 foot. So you do a 6 foot setback with a 3 foot eve is currently
Yeah.
allowed. But if you do that 6 foot setback, you wouldn't count that 1 foot as part of your square footage. The house gets a little bit deeper, but that's kind of saying you couldn't do it. So I would make that recommendation that we allow for a 3 foot overhang, assuming that it does not, that you maintain a minimum of 3 foot setback from the overhang to the property line. And I guess I've seen before, what will happen is people, you're only allowed to build a certain amount of square footage. And so they'll build kind of a cantilevered porch on the back and then put grass underneath it and try to claim that that's not part of the house because it's got a grass floor. So it's not part of the structure. And I think this kind of closes that loophole. So I'm generally supportive of it, but I think that I don't want to encapsulate this 3 foot overhang for as part of that. And then can you clarify the fence? I know we've got, I believe some of these comments on the fence stuff is these newer units where we're seeing perimeter site walls, and then you're having to fill the grade on the inside with the new flood stuff, but then you have the potential fall hazards. You have a 42-inch railing. Can you kind of clarify, because it does get confusing with this, and I'm not sure what is actually changing within the code
We're
here.
incorporating how you measure the height of the wall and fence based on referring back to the grade of the lot. And because of the way how they define is the average between the two sides, there could be an opportunity that you have a drop off of more than 24 inches, 30 inches, which will require guardrail. And because of the flood zone stuff, there could be drop offs of greater than that. And part of this prevents someone being negatively affected next door with a 6 foot fence on top of a 4 foot retaining wall.
Right.
So we're limiting, if you've got to have a guardrail, it has to be 42 inches. But at that point, it's already 42 inches plus 4 feet on the other side, which is actually more than we allow in our code. So we're trying to be preemptive in anticipation of this could possibly happen. Because we've had a couple instances where the wall on the new property has maxed out its wall height, but then it has negatively impacted the other side by having a wall that is, it's 7 or 8 feet tall on
Right.
the other side.
Yeah, and I've seen it. So I've actually come up against this, and that measurement of 42, my understanding is that anything 30 inches is where you have to have guard protection. So if you end up having to fill your lot to 30 inches, you now need a railing that's 42 inches. That's 72 inches. That's exactly 6 feet on your neighbor's property. Anything higher than that, and you really can't do it. And so I believe that's already within our code by specifying, because I think our code says 6 feet from the neighboring property currently, right?
It's the average between the two.
The average between, well, this says the average between the natural grade, so we're not counting the filled grade. So it's still only a 6 foot
And
height.
therein lies, going back to the definition of lot, the natural grade when it's filled, and this is where we can't anticipate what's going to happen everywhere, but we have instances where there are lots that have been filled for years. And their natural grade now, we just had one, is 3 feet higher than the one next door. So they came in, built a new house, they took down the fence that was there, wanted to put a new one in, and they're already 3 feet higher than the one next door. So if you would like to go back to how our original definition was, the natural grade, there's no proof of what the natural grade of the property that's being built on was, because we don't have it.
It just is the grade.
Yeah. And so we're trying to like deal with a number of instances, because our code kind of assumes that Florida's flat, and for the most part, Florida is flat, but because of flooding some other inches, we're not making it flat anymore.
Mhm. So this is then effectively averaging the two. So if you were filling a lot by 30 inches, you're kind of effectively able to build a 15-inch taller wall.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay. I generally don't like it. In general, I'm in favor of things like that because I think it makes it easier to build. But I have seen where it seems in some properties, it looks out of place when all of a sudden a giant concrete wall gets built right on the, and there's no setback required on that concrete wall, right? It's basically on the property line.
It's a retaining wall.
And because it's a retaining wall and it's actually cantilevered, you've got a huge foundation. So you're kind of digging out your neighbor's property
And-
just to be able to put that wall in.
Yeah, and there's a number of other structural issues that are becoming challenging because most structural design requires a certain amount of cover on the non-parcel side. And we've got a wall that was put in that, though on the permit documents, it shows the ground cover for that cantilevered footer being on the property that doesn't have the wall. But in reality, it only got 2 inches of soil on that side. So in time, that footer is going to slide. It may not happen in my lifetime. It might happen in yours because you're younger, but there's a number of things we're struggling with right now, especially with the number of retaining walls that are likely to come down the road eventually. The other piece that's problematic too is that we allow an 8-foot fence on the back along an alley, and we're still looking at some access and ingress egress issues that some people have been really creative. As an example, somebody, when they put their fence in, their setback to their building was so small, you couldn't access that area from the part of the fence was at the front. So they decided to put a gate that accessed their neighbor's property. And we're like, crapola, we don't have anything against that. So we're looking at a number of things to bring to the commission in a future round. Also, the issue is that under our code, everybody's responsible to maintain their half of the alley. Well, we don't have a requirement that you have a gate in the back of your fence to access the alley. So over time, it becomes a wall. And if you're in the middle of the block, are you really going to go all the way around and maintain your alley? I don't think so. So something for the policy decision is, okay, if we're going to continue to enforce and cite people for maintaining their alley, they should be required to have access to the alley to do that. And if the preponderance of people in Lake Worth Beach don't want to have that gate, then Lake Worth Beach is probably going to have to accept that the city's going to maintain the alleys. Same thing happens in West Palm Beach and some of our alleys.
Right.
Nobody goes back there, and it's scary.
The other thing with these walls and that's why I'm bringing it up with this thing, because I know we've got a big issue with these walls, is a lot of times the footing for a retaining wall like that could be a 3-foot wide footing because you're cantilevering the wall all the way on the outside of it. And so now when we look at pervious, yeah, you're putting 6 inches of fill on top of there, but if your house is only a 5-foot setback and you've got 3 feet of concrete wall, and then you got a footing with a raised stem wall, that's 12 inches. You could have like a 6-inch strip of actual pervious material for water to flow through on your lot. And I don't think we account for that in terms of whether that footer accounts for any pervious or impervious. And I'm worried we're seeing a lot of these kind of getting built, and I'm not sure what the long-term impact of them is. I'm a little bit concerned of making it easier for that to be done currently without that kind of deeper dive into how, as a community, we feel about these walls and how they should be handled. Because I've
What's
seen
really,
it come
what would
in.
solve it in a lot of cases is that you do stem wall construction, you don't fill the lot. You fill underneath the slab.
Right.
And that may be where we end up at some point, is saying you can only raise your lot by X amount, and maybe we have a limit on it. I don't know how, we may not be entirely legal on good ground to do that, but it's a discussion, and you're more than welcome. We'll probably have a workshop on it, because there are impacts. It impacts the historic districts far more than anywhere else. And we have new houses coming in. It looks like this raised tooth, but we can't prevent them from developing on that property. And so we have a meeting, I think, next week about it, and with someone, and I'm like, this is where it's going. Eventually, good, bad, or indifferent, FEMA or some other entity is likely going to require all of the buildings to be raised if you're going to stay in the flood hazard area and you want FEMA insurance. Now, the people who don't have a mortgage don't have to necessarily have the FEMA insurance, but most people have a mortgage. And so if you want to buy an historic house, you may, like replacing the roof, you may have to jack your house up too. And we're going to have to deal with that.
And the other thing that we have is, you mentioned the alleys and maintenance on the alleys. A lot of I don't know, I've talked with the civil department here in the roads, and I don't know if there's a really good map for the alleys in terms of how the alleys drain. Because some of the alleys do kind of drain north to south, but some of them you've got across the block, it's all draining, west to east. And so if someone comes in and builds a wall along the alley, and you have multiple ones that do that, you now are impeding the flow of water. And how does that alley drain? You could start having flooding issues in alleys that impact other things.
With all due respect,
It could get worse.
let's get back to the issue.
So I guess my recommendation on this one would be not to, I honestly think not to include this until I think there is a workshop or more deep dive on the walls. And I think if we're through doing this, we're allowing the walls to get higher. So therefore making it easier for someone to come in and do that style of construction where you build a wall on the property line and fill your lot up.
Well, what I'll say is this is trying to bring into closure the fence and wall definitions as they reflect back to the grade on the definition of a lot. Not doing anything is going to make it more complicated to do what's already allowed. And there are some challenges. We need to do something as an interim stopgap until we can get to the bigger issue, because we've already had two fences and two walls fall into this sort of quirky, murky area that what we proposed here would solve until other things can be talked about. But if you want to let it just hang out there and other people get away with stuff, that's okay.
No, I guess that's not it. The reason I have specifically made application with wall, and I was told, and it was, we had to do it to where it had to be 6 feet relative to the neighboring property. And so this is now kind of would have made it easier. And I guess I don't understand what the ambiguity, but I guess how would you, understanding my concerns, I think we share the same concerns. What do you think?
What happens is we base a building permit and a zoning review based on what is submitted. No one is going out ahead of time and to see what the grade is on the neighboring property. So we're having to do some guesstimation. And so the average, as Melissa mentioned, in the lot is one way to get out. We have some of that information, but people are very good at skirting rules if there's even the smallest little loophole. And we have discovered that what we have now has presented some problems for inspections of the walls and fences. Which are not governed by, the walls are governed by the building code, but the fences are not. Yeah, the application comes in on a building permit, but it's not a building permit.
You have anything to add, Daniel?
Last question, I was on the string lights. I understand, I think that is, to clarify, we're talking about the front yard of a house. If somebody had blue accent lights in their backyard, we're not going into people's backyards and telling them that they have to change any kind of accent lighting in their backyard, right? We're just saying,
Well, we've had complaints about people having lights in the backyard, and right now string lights are not allowed. And so we're trying to fix that and some people may have to accept the fact that they have colored lights in their neighbor's yard, and they might have to look at them. But right now, they're not allowed in the city except under the major thoroughfare guidelines downtown. Yes, I know.
So this would allow white string lights in front or back of yards?
And a very interesting definition of how the holidays are going to be enforced, which is creating a nightmare for me and code, but essentially, if you add up all the holidays that are out there, you could have some kind of holiday themed light pretty much every month of the year.
Yep, St. would be green.
Yeah. So
Beer holiday.
we may end up being the tacky light capital of the world, but could be. LEDs are all kinds of different colors. So
All right, do we have any other board member comments? Would like to make a motion on item B? Excuse me, on the public? Public, would you like to say anything? Okay, there you go. All right, do we have a motion on item B? Which would be ordinance 2024-6.
I can do this. I move to recommend to the city commission to adopt the proposed LDR text amendments included in ordinance 2024-06.
With the change recommended by staff. Needs to-
that little
Yes, yes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
We can have a quick discussion on the motion right before a vote, isn't that allowed? Would you consider amending it just to, for the overhang to allow to 3-foot overhang and not count as building area? Or,
I mean, I think we can. I don't personally have an issue with amending the recommendation to recommend that. I guess we'll see how the rest of the board feels about that.
If you
And
choose to amend your motion, then, and I can't pronounce your name, I'm sorry.
It's fine, Evelyn. Just
Evelyn, you'd have to agree to that, amendment,
Mm.
which would be the third, allow a 3-foot, overhang predicated that the 3-foot overhang does not come any closer than 3 feet to the property line. And we'll,
but I don't want to amend the motion if it's gonna prevent anyone else from voting on it. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but so maybe we should have a little bit of discussion. I'm willing to amend that to reflect.
I'm
Dan's.
okay with the 3 feet.
Okay.
I'm just asking that we read the whole motion again in full because of what there was 2 discussions after a motion was presented here, so.
Yeah. So it would be, I move to recommend to the city commission to adopt the proposed LDR text amendments included in ordinance 2024-6, with the correction pointed out by staff for the underlined portion, and with the change to the 3-foot overhang rule.
we can
Second?
amend
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we are on our last ordinance 2024-7. Would you like to read the motion? Well, the ordinance?
Ordinance 2024-07, an ordinance of the city of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, amending chapter 23 land development regulations, article 4 development standards, section 23.4-25 micro units, and providing for severability, conflicts, codification, and effective date.
This is an itty bitty change in section C based on feedback that we've had over the past 2.5 years from developers who were interested in doing micro units, which is a very solid option for affordable housing, that our requirement for the personal service retail area, making it a mixed use project, was too large for most projects to justify, especially when micro units are only allowed in mixed use districts, which already have some of those services. So we're proposing to reduce it to a much lower minimum. They still have to have some of it, but it's far less than what it was before.
A minimum of what? Can you just further explain?
Personal
As it is
service.
right now, 15% of the gross area of the project has to be personal service, retail or commercial. compared to the number of units that are there. We're proposing it to be reduced to a 10% gross area or 2,500 square feet, which is our lowest threshold of use, whichever is less. Because we have a section that the minimum number of units, I think, is 20. And if they did small units, 20 times 350 is basically 7,000 square feet. And 15% of that is a pretty large area for a building that small. And so we're proposing it to be less. And I think we'll have at least 2 micro unit projects that you'll likely both see both of them if we were to make this change.
Okay, so you're lessening the mixed use space to have more units.
Well, it doesn't necessarily make more units because the density is what it is. It's just that the amount of mixed use that you're having to build based on the number of
Be
units you
less.
have is not economically viable so far for most of the projects. Because one project was going to do over 100 micro units and their mixed use area was huge. That's annoying, that sound. But and they said we're going to go a different route because we don't think we can rent all this space out, especially because it was located in an area that had a lot of uses right across the street that would serve that micro unit project.
Generally, I do agree with a lot of these changes, except for 2, and one's a really big one. Item A, the project size, 20 micro units. I mean, there are lots that are tiny. It says right here, it says all micro unit projects must provide a minimum.
That's not being changed. There's no,
Okay, but that in general with this, I believe that it should be open in terms of our recommendation that, and that's just my feeling, that if a developer wants to come in and do 10 of them, right? Why does Lake Worth feel that that is too small of a project to do?
Okay, well, one reason why it was this, and there is a difference of opinion on the city commission now, is that there was concern, one, micro units was written 4.5 years before it ever got to the commission for approval, because it was concerned it was going to set a precedent for substandard housing. Well, no one's going to build brand new substandard housing, but anyway. It was also claimed that micro units would lead to a proliferation of Section 8 housing vouchers in the city. That people would be overcrowded in them because they would be small and they would put the same number of people in a micro unit as they would a regular unit. So there were all these criticisms of it. And until we had a commission that was more open to affordable housing and options, was there any openness for a micro unit? Now, when the micro unit size, number of units gets fairly low, there isn't enough personal service to make it work.
Right.
And our justification from a number of things is that the micro units being smaller, other services, we have a reduction in the parking requirement. We have a reduction in a lot of things. We'd like to see some of the services provided on site so those people don't have to have a car because we're not requiring them to be parked.
And that's in there, yeah, I
Yeah.
see it, yeah. The only issue is 20, I mean, I get everything you're saying, and I understand that the volume of the services would be diminished if the smaller the project gets. But at the same time, if you're looking at something that's 10 micro units, they might only have like a bagel store down there or something, right? But at the same time, I just can't see, there's so many opportunities in the city and all these lost lots that could really use 10 small units and that project could work perfectly. So 20, if it's my recommendation, I think it should be lowered to at least 10. That's my,
Okay.
So my issues with the proposed changes, you mentioned a proposed development of micro units that was going to have 100 units. Under my reading of this proposed change, they would be permitted to only have 2,500 square feet of service space because of the whichever is less.
Right.
And that's 2 point. I mean, I don't know. That's like less than 5%. That's a very, very small percentage. So I think that would really defeat the purpose of even having the 10% figure on there. To me, it seems if 10% of the square feet, just so y'all know, like I think it's pretty straightforward, but 10% of the gross area of the project or 2,500 square feet. I mean, they're always going to choose, if they don't want to do this service, they're always going to choose 2,500 square feet, and that's always going to be less. So given that this was initially passed with 15% and no less exception, I think it's kind of flipping it on its head. At least what was previously passed. So that's my comment on this proposal.
Anyone else have a?
Yeah, so I think there's two things here with regards to the micro units in terms of the additional space. So you've got your mixed use space, which is the one that's being reduced here. And so if you had a minimum project that say is 20 units, and let's say they're 400 square foot units, so you have 8,000 square feet total, some additional space, maybe you're 10,000 square feet, so 10% is 1,000. So the 2,500 is not always going to govern. If you're doing a smaller project, you might be as low as 1,000 square feet. And 2,500 square feet, like for a donut shop or a bagel shop or whatever, coffee place downstairs, it is, 2,500 is a pretty decent size space for a commercial component. It's not undersized to have an actual legitimate commercial use in it. So I'm okay with that. We had I'm not going to name the project, but we had a project come before us previously that was not a micro unit project, but they took advantage of a mixed use to get a 25% parking reduction, and they only provided basically like 500 square feet. And so I think there's other areas of the code where that's, but for this, I have no problem with that reduction to 10% and the 2,500. The other thing that they're not reducing is what's referred to as the interior shared common areas. So the idea of micro units, and the reason why they want a minimum of 20, is the idea is you're getting a smaller unit, but you're getting common shared area space for all of the residents to share. And there's a requirement that be 10% of the total square footage. So again, if you're building 10,000 square foot building with 20 units, you'd have to put 1,000 square foot game room, movie room, lobby, something for people to use that's common shared area, barbecue area, whatever. So that area is not getting smaller, but the commercial component is, and I'm okay with this as written.
So how many square feet approximately would 100 micro unit development be?
Well, in its smallest iteration, you could do it in as little as 25,000 square feet.
100 units would be in 25,000
The smallest micro unit,
square feet.
250 square feet.
So then 10% of that is the 2,500 square foot figure.
Yes.
Is that why this
No.
2,500 square foot figure is being proposed?
For a permitted use by right is 2,500 square feet or less. And it's built in our code.
But this is a requirement that they do it because micro units it's already a compromise between people in Lake Worth and developers. And,
Right.
and as you mentioned, it's a controversial issue. So what I'm saying is that this seems to not be, this is a big way out of the deal, that whatever deal is reflected in this statute as it's written, the proposed amendment is a huge loophole. That's my in terms of how much service area must be provided in these micro unit developments. Because like you said, mixed use districts have other service uses, but not mixed use projects. And this is not a mixed use. I mean, this is a mixed use project. And it makes sense to have that use, I think, be proportional to the overall size. And I think 10% is fair on that.
Okay, you have any other comments?
Just my last thing, I think we disagree on this, and it's something good.
Yeah.
Because in a mixed use district, you can build 100% residential, right? You can build, if you're building normal size units, you don't have to put any commercial. You don't have to put any commercial in there. And so to me, the compromise is you're making the units smaller, but you're providing space for the kind of aggregate living, the communal living, so to speak, of the tenants. And then there's the addition that in order to do that, you have to provide some meaningful commercial. But to me, I think still, again, if you're building, a building on a commercial block and you have 2,500 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor, and then the rest is activity area for your tenants and spaces, I think that still provides a good quality project. So I would be in favor of this.
Anything else?
These are fun because we either do my motion and it gets voted down and then yours. But in either way, it sounds like we're gonna have two, unless the first motion passes. So I'm gonna make.
I mean, it's a
motion.
recommendation, yeah, so.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah. I would like to say one thing. I really can't make a motion because I am the chairman, but I would like to, as part of a recommendation, talk about the reduction to a 10 unit building if possible.
Curious as to why.
Excuse me?
I'm curious as to why.
Because there are a lot of places where people would do the 10 and may not do it in lots that are available for that. And 20 is not sort of the lowest number I think you could reach. I think it would still work at 10 units. And they have had other reasons why they want to make some of these amenities and things like bigger and things, but I think you'd still have one sort of commercial space that could work. And the 10 units, especially with Lake Worth having so many little lots and things that are around, why not do 10 and make it useful, the space, right? And that was it. So now it's listed as 20. Why not limit it to 10? Because it could work. Yeah.
I'm not opposed to being 10.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it works. It works in a lot of, I've seen it done. That's why it's odd, like in LA and a lot of places, Atlanta, I've seen it, micro units being done like that. And I just can't believe why we have it at 20. So that's it. Good point. Okay, I hear a motion.
I'm considering what you said. Sorry.
Okay, no,
Prepared
it's-
to grace, and I know we're I'm sorry, we're gonna take another minute here, but if we're just wholesale stuff, this change on the commercial, and we're talking about the commercial, there was a project that I looked at employing this where we could do 20 units, but it really just made sense for residential. It didn't make sense as a commercial property. And so we basically completely went away from the idea of doing micro units. And I'm wondering what the board would think because to me, there is this kind of interesting thing of micro units where you build smaller units, but you meaningfully provide shared space that people can live in and accommodate. And if someone was to do, a full 20% space, but instead of 10% being for the residents and 10% being some public amenity, if they were to do a combined 15 or 20%, but it was all just for the residents and there wasn't just a commercial component to it, does that meaningfully change it? In your mind?
I mean, I think it would, just in terms of the numbers. So I feel like as proposed that basically it's one side is losing out with this proposal. I mean, so I hear what you're saying about increasing the resident services by the same amount to alleviate the issue with having an impractically large bagel shop or too much space for the services. So I think it would change the calculation, and it would make micro units as equally undesirable to developers as it is now. But I think that this proposal would make micro units much more desirable to developers. But as you mentioned, the switch, the 10%, I don't see any difference between as the ordinance exists today and requiring that 10% be internal living communal areas.
Well, what do you think about that? If someone wanted to build a micro housing unit and instead of doing 10% commercial and 10%, they were going to do 20% of the total square footage and not have any, outward facing commercial, does that change to you the whole concept of a?
Well, one of the other thoughts with having some commercial space is the rental rate for the commercial space is substantially higher than the residential. And the commercial rents would help subsidize getting them built. Because the goal is to really get some built. So we don't have any, except unless they're non-conforming smaller units that are ADUs or in some of our motor lodge hotels that have been changed to apartments. So it's its own animal.
I mean, it'd be an interesting concept, and not to kill your thought there, but to say that the developer could choose not to do any sort of mixed use at all and just do all like regular development and do just all units that don't have a commercial component, if they'd like to, like as an option.
I would say if they're gonna do that, they have to do more than 10%, like do a meaningful kind of thing. But the reason I'm going was the one instance in which I looked at it, the commercial was fairly small. We didn't think that we had a great market for doing that. And then the investor was interested in a residential and didn't have a lot of experience managing commercial property and just didn't want the headache of dealing with a commercial tenant. And so they felt they could make the numbers work from a residential perspective, but then we had this added cost to build a commercial that we weren't really sure how it was going to be, what the street frontage was going to be, how you provided access and parking for that, as opposed to kind of residential parking, which might be in the back, as opposed to commercial parking, which might have to be in the front. So just as an option, I know you like, anything that's flexible and can do a deal. Is that something? Because I don't mind reducing the units down to 10. I don't mind the reduction of 10% down, but I just think if we said that the total, you have to provide 20% additional square footage, a minimum of 10% for the residents, and up to 10% for commercial, or, all of it could be combined into residential space.
So, I guess we could add a sentence such that, and we may have to word craft it later, but if a project does not provide a mixture of uses, the interior shared common area shall be at least 20%.
Yeah.
That may have to have a little bit of tweaking to it. I don't think that's going to be the end of the world. But with that type of approach, I would highly encourage you to consider the 10 unit being the minimum.
Yeah.
Versus the 20.
It's an interesting, you said I went to a housing symposium in LA in October, and we went through some micro units and we visited some other units that were subsidized type housing. It was really, really cool, nicely designed by architects and things. And one of the interesting things about the extra space was not commercial, but it was like laundry space. Like people met to do their laundry there, right? And also people had a kid's room and things like that. So that could be part of the percentage.
We have an outline of.
Yeah, no, I know
what the
you have,
spaces can be.
Mhm.
And it's quite,
More community space, right?
Yeah.
Like little garden space, kid space, that kind of stuff. So I mean, those things could be built into it too. And maybe that would be a good thing to ask the commission to look at. So how do we
Okay.
wrap it up?
I will. Okay, I'm gonna give a shot here. I'm gonna make a motion, looking for the draft motion, but there we go. I'm gonna make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2022-13. Sorry, I'm reading. It's 2024-7. With the following recommended revisions, one being line 54 project size, revision to 10 as the minimum units, and then an additional revision under the interior shared common areas, whereby if a project does not provide any mixed use component, commercial component, that they would be required to provide a minimum of 20% of the gross living area.
if you don't, man, I'd rather that be in C versus E.
So noted. So that notation should be in C. But otherwise, as staff presented it.
Hey, there's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes.
Did you vote?
You-
I think he's still thinking about his vote.
abstain. I mean,
Oh, okay.
It's okay. It's all
the
right.
fact is, I mean, they have the two, they're gonna make whatever decision they wanna make
With our recommendation.
with our recommendation.
That's okay. Okay, so planning issues. There's always planning issues. Could you enlighten us? No planning issues. What a beautiful. thing.
The biggest planning issue, which still remains unknown, is that the Sunset Properties pulled their application. And we've not heard back from them as to what they are planning or not planning to do.
Oh,
So, don't know.
okay.
He's been suspiciously quiet. So I don't know what's, because he made declarations at both your meeting and the other meeting that he would resubmit it as a single family, two family 14 rezoning. But that hasn't happened. So I don't know what's going on with that. The initial building permit documents, construction documents for the Gulfstream Hotel were received this week. We're hoping to plan in collaboration with them, a groundbreaking in commemoration of Historic Preservation Month in May. So stay tuned for that. I hope that you will come because that is a seminal project that I think every one of us has been waiting for at this point, 18 years to happen. So that's big news. And the major change to Live Local, we found out today that to take out the industrial area being applicable for Live Local was not moving forward. So the industrial areas will remain as it stands now in the Live Local options. And we spoke to someone today about a project. There's another one looking at it, which now maybe that's why they've slowed down because they were going to try to get their entitlements in by the end of June on a project based on the proposed legislation changing. So we have at least two other ones that are already real projects moving along and they're on federal highway. So they'll be coming soon.
Right.
Wasn't the original Live Local, there was still an exclusion for industrial if industrial and straight commercial zoning didn't account for at least 10% of the total zoning?
That's still
that-
there.
And in our city, does industrial and straight commercial? I know we have a lot of mixed use in the city, so I wasn't sure how much straight commercial and industrial we had.
Lake Worth, when you really look at it, it's pretty small, but Parker Commerce is huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
All right. Public comments, that guy.
Good, thank
All right. Great comment. All right, department reports.
We got our budget in, so
Okay.
hopefully it'll move forward
Let me
successfully.
see. Board member comments. We had a lively meeting on 3 issues. I like it. Good stuff. Any comments? Okay,
Please, when you have a chance, look at the city's meeting schedule. There are a lot of meetings coming up talking about short-term rentals, artificial turf, ARPA, the pool, WMODA, which is the Weinstein Museum of Decorative Arts, which is doing a sort of a workshop with the CRA to get a project through for the L&M property, which was so controversial behind along L&M and K. So there's a lot coming up in April and May that you should, as residents for Lake Worth Beach, they will impact you in some way. So if you can watch and stay informed, I would highly encourage that.
all right. Thank you. Done.